Before this video starts, I'd just like to make an announcement. I have the Liberal Tears mug for $14.99 on my website. It is the first link in the description if you want to go pick one up. Don't worry if it breaks when it comes to your house. I'll send you another one for free out of my pocket. I don't care. I want you to get your Liberal Tear mug. It comes in Liberal Tears white with the face, black with the face, white without the face, and black without the face. So pick whichever one you want, and it'll come to your door in about 3 to 5 days. So that should be epic. First link in the description. Thank you. Let's go on with the video.
Mr. Gowdy for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Director Comey. Secretary Clinton said she never sent or received any classified information over her private email. Was that true?
Our investigation found that there was classified information sent.
So it was not true?
Right. That's what I said.
Okay. Well, I'm looking for a little shorter answer so you and I are not here quite as long. Secretary Clinton said there was nothing marked classified on her emails either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true. There were a small number of portion markings on, I think, 3 of the documents.
Secretary Clinton said I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
Secretary Clinton said neither she nor anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true?
That's a harder one to answer. We found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space, whether they were deleted or whether when a server was changed out something happened to them. There's no doubt that there were work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system.
Secretary Clinton said her lawyers read every one of the emails and were overly inclusive. Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
Well, in the interest of time, and because I have a plane to catch tomorrow afternoon, I'm not going to go through any more of the false statements, but I am going to ask you to put on your old hat. False exculpatory statements, they are used for what?
Well, either for a substantive prosecution or for evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution.
Exactly. Intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Is that right?
Right.
Consciousness of guilt and intent. In your old job, you would prove intent, as you just referenced, by showing the jury evidence of a complex scheme that was designed for the very purpose of concealing the public record. And you would be arguing, in addition to concealment, the destruction that you and I just talked about, or certainly the failure to preserve. You would argue all of that under the heading of content. You would also be arguing the pervasiveness of the scheme, when it started, when it ended, and the number of emails, whether they were originally classified or up-classified. You would argue all of that under the heading of intent. You would also probably, under common scheme or plan, argue the burn bags of daily calendar entries or the missing daily calendar entries as a common scheme or plan to conceal. 2 days ago, Director, you said a reasonable person in her position should have known a private email was no place to send and receive classified information. You're right, an average person does know not to do that. This is no average person. This is a former First Lady, a former United States Senator, and a former Secretary of State that the President now contends is the most competent, qualified person to be president since Jefferson. He didn't say that in 2008, but he says it now. She affirmatively rejected efforts to give her a state.gov account. She kept these private emails for almost 2 years and only turned them over to Congress because we found out she had a private email account. So you have a rogue email system set up before she took the oath of office, thousands of what we now know to be classified emails, some of which were classified at the time. One of her more frequent email comrades was in fact hacked, and you don't know whether or not she was. And this scheme took place over a long period of time and resulted in the destruction of public records, and yet you say there is insufficient evidence of intent. You say she was extremely careless, but not intentionally so. You and I both know intent is really difficult to prove. Very rarely do defendants announce, on this date, I intend to break this criminal code section. Just to put everyone on notice, I am going to break the law on this date. It never happens that way. You have to do it with circumstantial evidence. Or if you're Congress and you realize how difficult it is to prove specific intent, you will formulate a statute that allows for gross negligence. My time is out, but this is really important. You mentioned there's no precedent for criminal prosecution. My fear is there still isn't. There's nothing to keep a future Secretary of State or President from this exact same email scheme or their staff. And my real fear is this. It's what the chairman touched upon. This double-track justice system that is rightly or wrongly perceived in this country. That if you are a private in the Army and you email yourself classified information, you will be kicked out. But if you are Hillary Clinton and you seek a promotion to Commander-in-Chief, you will not be. So what I hope you can do today is help the average person, the reasonable person you made reference to, the reasonable person understand why she appears to be treated differently than the rest of us would be. With that, I would yield back.
It's my conclusion. Sure, it's my conclusion, but I'm reporting what the team thought and their supervisors. As I said, this was, as painful as it is for people sometimes, this was not a close call. I think questions are fair. I think criticism is healthy and fair. I think reasonable people can disagree about whether I should have announced it and how I should have done it. What's not fair is any implication that the Bureau acted in any way other than independently, competently, and honestly here. That's just not true. I knew this was going to be controversial. I knew there'd be all kinds of rocks thrown. But this organization and the people who did this are honest, independent people. We do not carry water for one side or the other. That's hard for people to see because so much of our country we see things through sides. We are not on anybody's side. This was done exactly the way you would want it to be done. That said, questions are fair. Feedback is fair.
Absolutely. But the foot soldiers, we use that term in the civil rights movement, your agents on the ground, you take issue with whether or not they were compromised or they were adhering to somebody else's message. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You can call us wrong, but don't call us weasels. We are not weasels. We are honest people, and we did this in that way. Whether you disagree or agree with the result, this was done the way you would want it to be done.
Chair thanks the gentlewoman. Recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by acknowledging progress. I think it's important that we do so. This morning, we've had 9 straight Democrats talk to the FBI about emails without asking for immunity. That's a record. And I suspect the reason that they have not asked for immunity from Director Comey is they would say they've done nothing wrong. I find that interesting because that's exactly what Heather Samuelson and Cheryl Mills' attorneys said. In fact, they said it just a few days ago, and I'll quote it. The FBI considered my clients to be witnesses and nothing more. And then Ms. Mills and Ms. Samuelson's attorney said this. I think this is the most interesting part. The Justice Department assured us my clients did nothing wrong. Well, Mr. Chairman, if you're assuring subjects or targets or witnesses, whatever you want to call them, that they've done nothing wrong, it does beg the question, what are you seeking and receiving immunity from? I mean, if you've done nothing wrong, laptops don't go to the Bureau of Prisons, Mr. Chairman. People do. So the immunity was not for the laptop. The immunity was for Cheryl Mills. And if the Department of Justice says you've done nothing wrong, it does beg the question of why you are seeking or receiving immunity. And it could be, Mr. Chairman, for a couple of different, it could be for the classified information that was the genesis of the investigation. It could be for the destruction of federal records, which came from that initial investigation, or it could be both. Mr. Comey, I want to ask you this. Did the Bureau interview everyone who originated an email that ultimately went to Secretary Clinton that contained classified information?
I don't think so. Nearly everyone, but not everyone.
Well, you and I had a discussion the last time about intent. You and I see the statute differently. My opinion doesn't matter. Yours does. You're the head of the Bureau. But in my judgment, you read an element into the statute that does not appear on the face of the statute. And then we had a discussion about intent. So why would you not interview the originator of the email to, number one, determine whether or not that originator had a conversation with the secretary herself?
There were a handful of people who the team decided it wasn't a smart use of resources to track down. One was a civilian in Japan, as I recall, who had forwarded something that somehow got classified as it went up. And the other were a group of low-level State Department people deployed around the world who had written things that ended up being classified. Nearly everyone was interviewed, but there was a small group that the team decided it isn't worth the resources.
Well, to that extent, if you interviewed the overwhelming majority of the originators of the email, will you make those 302s available to Congress? Because I counted this morning 30-something 302s that we do not have.
Okay. I'll go back and check. My goal is maximum transparency, consistent with our obligations under the law. I'll check on that.
Well, and I appreciate it for this reason. Intent is awfully hard to prove. Very rarely do defendants announce ahead of time, I intend to commit this crime on this date. Go ahead and check the code section. I'm going to do it. That rarely happens. So you have to prove it by circumstantial evidence, such as whether or not the person intended to set up an email system outside the State Department, such as whether or not the person knew or should have known that his or her job involved handling classified information, whether or not the person was truthful about the use of multiple devices, whether or not the person knew that a frequent emailer to her had been hacked, and whether she took any remedial steps after being put on notice that your email or someone who's been emailing with you prolifically had been hacked, and whether or not, and I think you would agree with this, Director, false exculpatory statements are gold in a courtroom. I would rather have a false exculpatory statement than a confession. I would rather have someone lie about something and it be provable that that is a lie, such as that I neither sent nor received classified information, such as that I turned over all of my work-related emails. All of that, to me, goes to the issue of intent. So I got two more questions, then I'm going to be out of time. For those who may have to prosecute these cases in the future, what would she have had to do to warrant your recommendation of a prosecution? If all of that was not enough, because all of that's what she did, if all of that's not enough, I mean, surely you cannot be arguing that you have to have an intent to harm the United States to be subject to this prosecution. I mean, that's treason. That's not a violation of this statute.
No, I think we'd have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt a general awareness of the unlawfulness of your conduct. You knew you were doing something you shouldn't do. And then, obviously, that's on the face of the statute itself. Then you need to consider, so who else has been prosecuted and in what circumstances, because it's all about prosecutorial judgment. But those two things would be the key questions. Can you prove that the person knew they were doing something they shouldn't do, a general criminal intent, general mens rea,
but the
way to treated other people similarly?
The way to prove that is whether or not someone took steps to conceal or destroy what they've done. That is the best evidence you have, that they knew it was wrong, that they lied about it.
It's very good evidence. Always want to look at what the subject said about their conduct.
Well, and there's a lot. There's a lot. If you saw her initial press conference, it all falls under the heading of false exculpatory statement. I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but the director did. You started off by giving us examples of things the Bureau has done. And every one of us who's worked with the FBI, that is the FBI that I know. The one that went and saved that girl in North Carolina. That is the FBI that I know. What concerns me, Director, is when you have 5 immunity agreements and no prosecution, when you are allowing witnesses who happen to be lawyers, who happen to be targets, to sit in on an interview. That is not the FBI that I used to work with. So I've been really careful to not criticize you. In fact, I said it again this morning. They wanted to know, was he gotten to? Did somebody corrupt him? No, I just disagree with you. But it's really important to me that the FBI be respected. And you got to help us understand, because it looks to me like some things were done differently that I don't recall being done back when I used to work with them. And with that, I would yield back to the chairman.
Can I respond to that?
Hello, everyone. Hey, I'm just stopping by to remind you that liberals are insane. Social justice warriors are becoming more violent and triggered than ever before. Anyways, be sure to subscribe to KGP TV on YouTube and have a blessed day. Yeah, man.